All right. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, whatever it is. Today, we're going to start our first major source that we're going to read in order to find some evidence to help us answer our major unit question. Of course, that major unit question, this unit is, how does fear cause people to either do dumb or stupid things, or how does it just negatively affect them? How does fear change people in a negative way, which causes them to do dumb or stupid things or irrational things? So we're going to read a lot of stuff that talks about fear, and hopefully we'll find some evidence that we can use to help us answer that question. Today, we're going to read The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. It's a story about the Spanish Inquisition. Now, the Spanish Inquisition very quickly took place in the 15th, 16th, and 17th century, basically, and it was a time when the Catholic Church was torturing and murdering people who either weren't doing what they were supposed to or were refusing to turn to Catholicism at all. Crazy time. And a lot of people were tortured and killed during this time. Edgar Allan Poe thought about it and said, you know what, I'm going to come up with a cool story about fear and what it does to people. And that's what we're going to read today. In fact, what I'm going to do, I have The Pit and the Pendulum right here. I'll probably have it linked for you online so you can read it online while I'm reading it out loud. Just open up a separate window. What I have done is I have broken up this story into 4 distinct readings. There's no way we're going to read this all in one sitting. It's just too long. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read out loud for you about 4 pages. I'm going to stop every once in a while. I'm going to explain to you what's going on. But more importantly, I'm going to show you where and you can see it right now, did my own headings, my own annotations, and I did my annotations next to it. So what I'm doing is I'm highlighting quotes that are dealing with fear, that are dealing with fear seriously affecting somebody to the point where they are losing their mind, and I do little notes on the outside of that. Now, I want to show you what your homework is tonight from me. I'm going to ask you to please fill out this form. Hold on right now a second. Let me get it for you. A Chrome tab. Here it is right here. Now, this is going to be your homework for tonight. What I'm going to ask you to do is a minimum of 3 annotations. And as you can see, I've already done 2 of them for you. You're going to come up with another, at least 1 or maybe 2 more on your own, or 3 more on your own. So we have 5 annotations. Now notice the quote. I'm asking you to give a quote from the story, and you're going to cite that quote correctly. If you'll please take a look right here, you can see where I have my mouse, that I have the quote. I was sick to death with that long agony. Then I have my page number outside in parentheses and then my period. Now, if you'll notice, I put the same quote twice, just in case whatever source you're reading The Pit and the Pendulum from does not have page numbers. You can very simply do the same quote and then just put in parentheses, in quotation marks, the title of the story, The Pit and the Pendulum. Everybody see that? And then afterwards, of course, you see the period goes afterwards. Now, notice on the right side, I have an annotation, and that annotation shows me what the note means, how that note shows how fear affects somebody negatively. And then I finish the sentence that I provided, which is, this quote clearly shows. And then as you can see, I said I was sick to death with that long agony. And my annotation is, this quote clearly shows his fear of death and tortures are causing him to feel like he's actually sick, so much so that he feels he could be dying from it. Now, that is some serious fear. We'll go over the next one when it's time. Let's go back to our reading right now, please. Let's stop presenting, and let's go back to our story. So, let's read. Remember, we're only doing 4 pages today, and we're only looking for 3 notes dealing with fear. I'm going to tell you right now, in the 4 pages, I have at least 7 or 10 notes dealing with fear. I will tell you each one. You'll highlight it at home, and then you choose the 3 or 5 best for your homework assignment tonight. Okay, so let's read. The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, in the beginning, you're going to see, and it's funny, my daughter picked up this story, and she said, oh my gosh, this isn't even in English, Dad. How could you possibly read this? And I said, notice, it's just the first 5 lines are in Latin. So what I did is I translated that. I went to Google and I translated it. And what it says, it says, impia tortatorum languis hic turbo figure. I don't understand that. So let's look at our translation. It says here, an unruly mob of torturers with an insatiable thirst for innocent blood once fed their long frenzy. Now our homeland is safe, the funereal cause destroyed, and life and health appear where dreadful death once was. So that's telling us that eventually the Spanish Inquisition is going to end, but the poor man who's being tortured in here, I don't know if he really agrees with that. But let's wait and see. Let's read. Okay. I was sick unto death with that long agony. And when they at length unbound me and I was permitted to sit, I felt that my senses were leaving me. All right, take a look. I highlighted it already. The first line, I was sick to death with that long agony. So I highlighted that and I made a little note and I put, he is scared to death. Let's go back to our presentation real quick. Let me show you. And there it is right there. You're going to see it. I was sick to death with that long agony. This came from page 1, so I put in parentheses 1, and there's my note. This shows he's so scared that it actually makes him feel sick like he's dying. That's some pretty serious fear. That's what I wrote right there. Okay, let's continue. Let's go back to our story. And here we go. I felt that my senses were leaving me. The sentence, the dread sentence of death, was the last distinct extenuation which reached my ears. After that, the sound of the inquisitorial voices seemed merged in one dreamy, indeterminate hum. So we just found out that this man, the minute he heard they were going to kill him, he started with this awesome fear. And I mean awesome in a bad way, not in a good way. It conveyed to my soul the idea of revolution, perhaps from his association and fancy with the burr of a mill wheel. This only for a brief period, for presently I heard no more. Yet for a while I saw, but with how terrible an exaggeration. I have that highlighted. I saw, but with how terrible an exaggeration. And my note is, his fear makes everything he sees worse. So from that point forward, everything he sees is exaggerated with this fear. Listen, he will explain some more. I saw the lips of the black-robed judges. They appeared to me whiter than the sheet upon which I traced these words, and thin even to grotesqueness, thin with the intensity of their expressions of firmness, of immovable resolution, of stern contempt of human nature. So now he's describing his judges. After they just told him, you're going to be put to death, he says from that moment forward, they appeared even more scary to him. Their lips were straight. They looked more angry. I mean, heck, these men are about to kill him. I saw the decrees of what to me was fate were still issuing from those lips. I saw them writhe with a deadly locution. I saw them fashion the syllables of my name, and I shuddered because no sound succeeded. I saw, too, for a few moments of delirious horror, the soft and nearly imperceptible waving of the sable draperies which enwrapped the walls of the apartment. I have that highlighted. I saw, too, for a few moments of delirious horror. So now even the way that the curtains are moving are causing him fear. Were they causing him fear before? No, because he wasn't sentenced to death. But now that he is dying, or he's about to die, or be tortured of all things, now everything is scaring him. And then my vision fell upon the 7 tall candles upon the table. At first they wore the aspect of charity and seemed white and slender angels who would save me. But then all at once there came a most deadly nausea over my spirit, and I felt every fiber in my frame thrill as if I had touched the wire of a galvanic battery, while the angel forms became meaningless specters with heads of flame, and I saw that from them there would be no help. Let's take a look at this right now. I have that quote down for you and for me. I think it's just a great quote. I would use this in my essay. Please look at this. The next quote, I just read this. But then all at once there came a most deadly nausea over my spirit, and I felt every fiber of my frame thrill as if I had touched the wire of galvanic battery. Now notice I put in parentheses page 1. That's where it came from. If there's no pages, you could just put the pit and the pendulum like I did above. But take a look at my annotation. This quote clearly shows his fear is so strong, it causes his body severe pain and displeasure, like he's being electrocuted. Listen to that. But then all at once there came a most deadly nausea over my spirit, and I felt every fiber of my frame thrill as if I had touched the wire of a galvanic battery. Think about that. He is so afraid, he feels like his whole body is shaking on the inside, and maybe it is. I don't think he's being electrocuted, but he could possibly be shaking out of fear. I know that does happen to people. It's happened to me before. Let's continue. So there goes that note. The next time I have a note, I'm going to fill it in. I'll put the quote here, and then I'll explain the quote. This quote clearly shows how his fear is blank. So let's get going. Let's stop presenting over there, and let's come back to our story. Excellent. And then there stole into my fancy, like a rich musical note, the thought of what sweet rest there must be in the grave. The thought came gently and stealthily, and it seemed long before it attained full appreciation. What he's saying is he can't wait till at least die, because when he dies, he won't have all this fear anymore. That's actually an interesting note if you want to do that. The Storm Fancy, the thought of what sweet rest there must be in the grave, that's a highlight right there. The fact that he doesn't want to die, but he's looking forward to it because it would take him away from the fear. Let's continue. The thought came gently and stealthily, and it seemed long before it attained full appreciation. But just as my spirit came at length properly to feel and entertain it, the figures of the judges vanished, as if magically, from before me. The tall candles sank into nothingness, their flames went out utterly, the blackness of darkness supervened. All sensations appeared swallowed up in a mad rushing descent, as if in the soul into Hades. Then silence and stillness. Night was the universe. All right, basically what he just said was, let's take a look and make sure. The figures of the judges vanished. Basically, all the candles went out. Once when they said, you are going to be tortured and dead. All the candles blow out and he goes into blackness. Does blackness make you less or more afraid when you're in complete and total darkness? Most kids will tell you much more afraid when it's complete darkness because you can't see what's coming your way. Look at the next paragraph. It's a great line. Get ready to highlight and to do this note. I had swooned, but still will not say that all of consciousness was lost. Do you guys know what swooned means? Swooned means fainted. So highlight that. Look, I have it right there. I had swooned, but still will not say that all of consciousness was lost. What's my note for that? He's so afraid he faints. My gosh, that's afraid. So what I would do at this point, I would pause this and I would go to my sheet or to my window. I would open it up. Here it is right here. And we could type this one in together. I want to show you how I do this. So I have my quote. I put it into quotation marks. I had swooned, period. No, semicolon, pardon me. It's a fancy period. But will still not say that all of consciousness was lost, that all of consciousness was lost. Boom, that's how I do it, a quote. Right? Now, I don't put the period in here because it's technically not the end of my sentence. What I do is my quotation marks. Then in parentheses, I put the page number. This is on page 2 of my copy. Then I put my period. Because what I'm saying is in my sentence here, that parentheses is part of the sentence. That 2 tells me that quote came from page 2. Now let's go over here to my annotations. I want you to see how easy it is to do quotes and notes, to do annotations. This quote clearly shows what? What does this quote clearly show? He is so afraid that he passes out. That's crazy afraid. I'm even going to write that. That is crazy afraid. And I'm going to do 2 exclamation points, and that'll tell me later. It'll show me. Look at these great notes that I have already. Sick to death. So sick that he gets nauseous and feels like he's being electrocuted, and now so scared that he's fainting. Think about that. These are excellent examples that I can use in my essay. I can say later, fear causes people to do some really awful things to their bodies. Take, for example, what happens to the main character in The Pit and the Pendulum. He is so afraid that he faints. Consider the following quote. Then I would say, I had swooned, but still will not say that all consciousness was lost. Then I would put my parentheses, page 2, and then I would say, this quote clearly shows how afraid he is and that fear causes him to faint. Do you see how easy this is? In fact, I just want to point out this quote and this note, they're going to make up your essay in the future. We're just going to come back and plug these into your essay. It's going to be a lot easier. But let's go back to our story. Look, I already have 3 quotes about fear, and I've only read a page and a half of this story. Let's go. We have another page and a half to read for this section of today's homework. So let's stop that, and let's go back to this. Okay. Hello, everybody. Let's do this. All right. What of it there remained I will not attempt to define, or even to describe, yet all was not lost. In the deepest slumber, no. In delirium, no. In a swoon, no. In death, no. Even in the grave, all is not lost. Else there is no immortality for man. Arousing from the most profound of slumbers, we break the gossamer web of some dream. Yet in a second afterward, so frail that web may have been, we remember not that we have dreamed. In the return to life from the swoon, there are 2 stages. First, that of the sense of mental or spiritual. Secondly, that of the sense of physical existence. This is a long way of saying when he woke up, he wasn't even sure if he was alive or not. But then he says he starts to realize that, listen. It seems probable that if, upon reaching the second stage, we could recall the impressions of the first, we should find these impressions eloquent in the memories of the gulf behind. He's also describing now the fact that you don't really remember your dreams when you wake up. Let's continue. Some people do, some people don't. I remember my dreams. My wife and my kids say they don't remember theirs at all. And what that gulf is, what? How it lashly distinguishes its shadows from those of the tomb. But if the impressions of what I have termed the first stage are not at will recalled yet after long interval, do they not come unbidden while we marvel once they come? Another way of saying, while we may not remember it when we wake up, some days we might be sitting there and our dreams might pop into our head. Oh yeah, I think I dreamt that. I think that's what he's saying here. He who has never swooned, is not he who finds strange palaces and wildly familiar faces and coals that glow? Is not he who beholds floating in midair the sad visions that the many may not view? Is not he who ponders over the perfume of some novel flower? Is not he whose brain grows bewildered with the meaning of some musical cadence which has never before arrested his attention? Amid frequent and thoughtful endeavors to remember, amid earnest struggles to regather some token of the state of seeming nothingness in which my soul had lapsed, there have been moments when I have dreamed of success. There have been brief, very brief periods when I have conjured up remembrances which the lucid reason of a later epoch assures me could have had reference only to that condition of seeming unconsciousness. Okay, I'm not really sure what's going on. Let's continue, because I think something important is about to happen. These figures of memory tell indistinctly of tall figures that lifted and, oh, I understand what's going on. He's telling us this story long after it happened. So actually, we know he's going to survive this because he's writing down this story. And he's saying, after I swooned, I didn't know what the heck was going on. But then I got consciousness, and this is what I remember happened. They were picking me up. Listen. These shadows of memory tell indistinctly of tall figures that lifted and bore me in silence down, down, still down, till a hideous dizziness oppressed me at the mere idea of the interminableness of the descent. Interesting. He said he knows he was picked up, and they started traveling down, underground, deeper underground into like caves or tunnels or vaults, holes in the ground. Very scary, especially if you're going down there to be tortured. They also tell of a vague horror at my heart on account of the heart's unnatural stillness. I have that underlined. They also tell of a vague horror at my heart, meaning I was so scared because they were taking me down. I didn't know where I was going. I was like, I'm so scared. They also tell of a vague horror at my heart on account of that heart's unnatural stillness. You could put that down, pause it now and get that down, but there'll be more. Then comes a sense of sudden motionless throughout all things. If there's those who bore me, a ghastly train had outrun in their descent the limits of the limitlessness and paused from the weariness of their toil. He said eventually they just stopped because they were going so long and they were carrying me. Where am I? Where have they taken me? After this, I called to mind flatness and dampness. And then all is madness, the madness of a memory which busies itself among forbidden things. He says, and then I don't want to think about where they brought me. It was so scary and awful. Awesome one to highlight right now. After this, I called to mind flatness and dampness, and then all is madness. Madness meaning fear. The madness of a memory which busies itself among forbidden things. In other words, the more he thinks about these things, the more it drives him crazy. The idea of torture without knowing how you're going to die is going to be worse than actually knowing you're going to die. If somebody tells you they're going to kill you and they walk into a room with, I don't know, give me some implements, a hammer, a chisel, a sharpened pencil, some water, you're going to start thinking, oh my God, what are they going to do with that hammer? Are they going to crack my head? What are they going to do with that pencil? Where are they going to stick that? In my fingernails, in my eyes? It's the fear of not knowing. And that's exactly what my note says here. Thinking the unthinkable makes him even more afraid. So what makes people more? Fear. It's actually a very good note. Fear makes people more afraid, not less. So the more you think about the worst that's going to happen, the more afraid you're going to get. Let's continue. Very suddenly there came back to my soul motion and sound, the tumultuous motion of the heart, and in my ears the sound of its beating. Then a pause in which all is blank. Then again, sound and motion and touch, a tingling sensation pervading my frame. Then the mere consciousness of existence without thought, a condition which lasted long. Then very suddenly thought and shuddering terror, an earnest endeavor to comprehend my true state. So he says he's going in, he's having moments of blackness, he doesn't know what's happening, and he's either in a stupor or he's passed out. But then when he wakes up and he realizes where I am in this dank vault in the basement somewhere, in Spanish Inquisition with the torturers, listen to this sentence, get this down. Then, very suddenly, thought and shuddering terror and earnest endeavor to comprehend my true estate. So when he thinks about his plight, where he is, it makes him more afraid. He wishes he could just forget. Let's put this down. So I go to my sheet. I open it up. I go down to my another quote. Let's type this one in. This is a quote. Then put in quotation marks. Make sure you type it correctly. Then, comma, very suddenly. Oh, I misspelled that, sorry. Suddenly, comma, thought, comma, and shuddering terror. Now, remember, copying these notes down now will save you the time of doing it later when it's time to write the essay at the end of the unit. And by the way, the essay is going to be so easy once we have these all down. Trust me. Shuddering terror, comma, and earnest endeavor to comprehend my true state. Good. No period, remember. The sentence does not end here because I have to put my parentheses. This is on page 3 of my copy. Remember, the period goes at the end of the parentheses. So let's look at my quote. Then very suddenly thought and shuddering terror and earnest endeavor to comprehend my true state. So when he thinks what might happen to him, he gets more afraid. So this quote clearly shows that fear makes people... See, how do we word this? This quote clearly shows that fear makes people more and more afraid. Not knowing what awful thing is going to happen to him. Hold on, sorry. Going to happen to him makes him even more afraid. Not knowing what awful torture torture. Not knowing what awful torture is in store for him makes it much worse. I'm going to put even the last note. Heck, I couldn't take it. All right, look at that annotation. Then very suddenly thought and shuddering terror and earnest endeavor to comprehend my true state. And then my annotation. This quote clearly shows that fear makes people more and more afraid. It continues. Let's do it in parentheses. It doesn't stop growing. Growing. Period. Not knowing what awful thing is going to happen to him makes him even more afraid. Not knowing what awful torture in store for him makes it much worse. Heck, I couldn't take it. Perfect. Now we have, how many notes do we have today? We have 4 unbelievably good notes, and any one of them I could use in my essay. And by the way, when it's time to write the essay, you're only going to need 1 or 2 quotes from this story. Think about it. At the end of this assignment, we'll have 5. At the end of the essay, we'll have 20. And then you just pick your top 2 ones. Everything's getting so much easier. I love it. Hold on a second. I know I get a little stupid over stories. Let's stop and let's go back and finish reading for today. Then a strong desire to lapse into insensibility. Then a rushing revival of the soul and a successful effort to move. And now a full memory of the trial, of the judges, of the sable draperies, of the sentence, of the sickness, of the swoon. Then entire forgetfulness of all that followed, of all that a later day and much earnestness of endeavor have enabled me vaguely recall. So far, I have not opened my eyes. Well, why not? I have that highlighted. Why hasn't he opened his eyes? Because he's afraid to. Think about that. So fear can cause you to shut down and not want to know what's going to happen in the future. A lot of people do that. Think about that. That's what little kids do. When I chase my little kids, like I'm going to tickle torture them or something like that, normally when they know they're going to get caught, and I know you know what I'm talking about, they don't keep running or fighting. They just fold down onto themselves and they hide themselves and they put their little head in and they think that's going to, and they close their eyes. And if I can't see my father, he's not going to get me. Oh no, I still get them. Hold on. I felt that I lay on my back unbound. I reached out my hand and it fell heavily upon something damp and hard. Then I suffered it to remain for many minutes, while I strove to imagine where and what I could be. I longed, yet dared not employ my vision. I dreaded the first glance at objects around me. That's a good note. I longed, yet dared not employ my vision. I dreaded the first glance at objects around me. He's too afraid to look because, oh my God, what he might see might be awful. It was not that I feared to look upon things horrible, but that I grew a glass that there should be nothing to see. He's afraid that he's in the middle of nowhere. At length, with a wild desperation at heart, I quickly unclosed my eyes. My worst thoughts then were confirmed. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I struggled for breath. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. That's a great note of fear. Listen, the blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I have that highlighted. I struggled for breath. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. So the dark is incredibly scary. When he finally opens his eyes, he realizes he is in a completely dark cell. That's a really scary place to be. In black darkness all the time, morning, day, and night. You don't know what time it is. You can't see yourself. I don't like it. The atmosphere, and it was intolerably close. I still lay quietly and made effort to exercise my reason. I brought to mind the inquisitorial proceedings and attempted from that point to deduce my real condition. The sentence had passed, and it appeared to me that a very long interval of time had since elapsed. Yet not for a moment did I suppose myself actually dead. Such a supposition, notwithstanding what we had read in fiction, is altogether inconsistent with real existence. But where and in what state was I? The condemned to death, I knew, perished usually at the autos de fe. I looked that up, the autos de fe. That's actually a public execution or punishment. He said most people, he did some history, he did some research before he came here, and he learned that most people were executed publicly. But he's down in a vault in the basement by himself. Interesting. And one of these had been held on the very night of the day of my trial. Had I been remanded to my dungeon to await the next sacrifice, which would not take place for many months? Oh, he realizes last night was the public execution where they killed everybody, but then they arrested him the next day. So he's saying, oh my God, do I have to sit in this cell, this cave, this hole in the ground? Or maybe it's a well for months until the next one? That causes some extreme fear. This I at once saw could not be. Victims had been in immediate demand. Moreover, my dungeon, as well as the condemned cells of Toledo, had stone floors, and light was not altogether excluded. A fearful idea now suddenly drove the blood in torrents upon my heart, and for a brief moment, I once more relapsed into insensibility. Look at this quote. Highlight this. In fact, I'm going to put it down. Oh my God, let's go. Present now. Let's go. A Chrome tab. This one is so good, I have to make sure I get it down. I would get it down if I were you as well. Let's see. Here's the quote right here. A fearful idea now suddenly drove. Let's put quotes. A fearful idea now suddenly. Where am I? Drove the blood in torrents. Drove the blood in torrents upon my heart. What does it mean to drive something in torrents? It means like waves. So he said he's so afraid he could feel the blood going through his body like waves. It's so crazy and scared. And for a brief period, I once more, oh crap, hold on, sorry. I once more relapsed into insensibility. Now, no period at the end of the quote. Remember that. I put my page number first in parentheses. That's page 3. And I put my period after that. Let's look at this quote. It's so good. A fearful idea now suddenly drove the blood in torrents upon my heart. And for a brief period, I once more relapsed into this. This quote clearly shows how much fear the main character is in, or the main character feels. Let's do a colon. It is, oh crap, that was not where I wanted to go. I have to watch out. It is making him, it makes him, let's do this. It makes him, let's see, I once more relapsed into insensibility. He swoons again. He faints again. He's so scared. It makes him so scared. He cannot think straight. Good. Now that is scared. Boom. There's my note. Now that is scared. Excellent. Let's go back. Let's finish. We are almost done. Upon recovering, I at once started to my feet, trembling convulsively in every fiber. I thrust my arms wildly above and around me in all directions. So he wakes up, he's in a completely dark room, and now he's trying to feel himself around. Is there a wall? Is there people? Are there other prisoners over there? Are there dead people? Are there alligators? Are there rats? Who knows? I felt nothing, yet dreaded to move a step, lest I should be impeded by the walls of a tomb. Perspiration burst from every pore and stood in big cold beads upon my forehead. You know what? I didn't have that highlighted, but I'm doing it now. Perspiration burst. I don't think he's hot, and that's why he's sweating. Perspiration burst from every pore and stood in cold beads upon my forehead. The agony of suspense grew at length intolerable, and I cautiously, that's a good one. The agony of suspense grew at length intolerable. The fear got so bad that he started to cautiously move. He didn't want to move, but he was so afraid that he started to. It caused him to move. With my arms extended and my eyes straining from their sockets in the hope of catching some faint ray of light, I proceeded for many paces, but still all was blackness and vacancy. I breathed more freely. It seemed evident that mine was not at least the most hideous of fates. In other words, he realizes he's not dead yet, but he is stuck in this dark chamber and he doesn't know what's going to happen to him. Now, I want to point out, we know he's going to live because he tells us this story later, but that doesn't mean his fear is going to stop. Excellent. Okay, we're done with part 1 of 4. Really well done. I want to point out, after every single part, please make sure you have at least 3 or 5 notes about fear. Specifically, how does fear change somebody negatively? Or how does it make you do something dumb or stupid? I know I do stupid things when I'm afraid. You don't want to see me get into bed at night when I have that feeling that somebody's going to grab me underneath grab my legs when the lights are off from underneath my bed. Woo! I jump into bed every night. Yeah, I'm 46 years old. Well, 45. I'll be 46 soon. But I'm still afraid of certain things, and it causes me to act sometimes pretty dumb. Or when I turn off those lights in the basement, oh man, I run up those stairs because I don't know what's going to grab my feet when I'm running up those stairs. I can almost feel the ghosts and monsters in my basement grabbing it. And I'm 46. OMG. Well, 45. I said that already. But you get my point. So now we are done with assignment 1 for today. Please, I'm going to show it to you again. Go back to your assignment and make sure this assignment has a minimum of 3 notes. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 great quotes. You can use my quotes. Make sure you make your own notes, how it affects them, how it affect you as well. Or you can come up with your own. Any questions or problems, please email me. Tomorrow, I will read part 2. We will have a whole new blank page. It'll say the Pit and the Pendulum, annotations number 2, and we will pick 3 to 5 more quotes about how fear negatively affects our character or makes him do something stupid. Excellent job. Thank you very much, everybody.